Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Glenn Albright, and I'm the Director of Applied Research at Cognito Interactive. I want to welcome you to the Supporting Veterans on Campus webinar. We are very, very fortunate today to have three very special panelists, a Colonel Michael Carrell, Colonel Steve Abel, and Dr. David Joseph, who will be with us shortly to do some really great presentations addressing veteran issues on campus and how they are dealt with. Our agenda today is going to begin with just an overview of the current situation and the challenges faced by veterans on campus. And then each panel member will present for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to have opportunities for questions and answers. Just before we begin, a couple of housekeeping hints here. We will certainly send you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, so don't feel compelled to have to write things down busily. We're also recording this webinar, and we can give you access to that recording. So we will record, or rather send you an email with both the PowerPoints and a URL to access the webinar. And last, if you have questions, we encourage you to ask them by entering them into the box on the lower right-hand part of your screen. As these presentations continue, things will pop up in your mind. Just go ahead, ask the question at that time, and then certainly we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the panelist presentations. So let's begin just by talking a little bit about Cognito Interactive, because I know many of you don't know about us. We're a New York City-based interactive learning company. We develop training simulations in the area of health and behavioral health, with a particular emphasis on gatekeeping skills. In particular, we have Veterans on Campus, which is a training simulation in which we train faculty and staff by placing them in a virtual environment, and they interact with emotionally responsive avatars to give them practice at the skills and knowledge to develop a competency in dealing with veteran populations. With that said, there are an awful lot of veterans in higher education today. We see 800,000, and this is rising very, very quickly with people coming home more from Afghanistan. With the GI Bill, it's set to rise another 500,000 in the upcoming decade. And unfortunately, we know also that the dropout rates are higher compared to non-veterans. In some studies, it's 70% dropout rate in certain community colleges compared to that of non-veteran populations, which is 45%. On top of that, we know also that a third of the previously deployed military personnel come back with some form of post-deployment stress. In some cases, people think this is a conservative figure, but we're talking about students coming on the campus who may be experiencing PTSD or mild TBI or depression or thoughts of suicide. And when you look at this population, slightly less than 50% of them are actually identified by the VA or getting help for this type of post-deployment stress. Nearly half the students, that is veteran students, reported thinking of suicide according to the Student Veterans of America survey, and they found that 20% of these said they had planned to harm themselves. In going to a recent report from the American Council of Education, they identified as the #1 priority for university is actually serving veterans is to train faculty. So this is where we get into listening to our panelists and how they are presenting the best practices to really facilitate the student-veteran experience. So with that said, we'd like to first go to Colonel Carrell. If you would go ahead and take over, please.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm Mike Carrell. I'm the Veterans Resource Analyst here at Ohio State. I figure most of you have probably heard of our university. We are in central Ohio, in the capital city, in the largest city in Ohio. Pretty large university, in the top 5 in the country. You can see there our fall numbers, about 57,000 and just under 1,800 veterans that are actually receiving benefits. We estimate another probably 250 to 350 are on our campus that have chosen to either not identify or not use their benefits at this time. And that number has grown already since the fall. We see a population very similar to what is nationally. You may see a higher female population. I don't know if most of you know, but females are about 8% of the veterans. That's expected to rise in about 10 years to about 12%, but nationally females are making up 27% of undergraduates, and we're right there with that number. Our office of, currently is called the Office of Veterans Affairs. We're going to be changing that to Military and Veterans Students Services. It was founded as an outgrowth of the Persian Gulf War when employees of the university came back and had potential issues with their jobs, either getting them back or issues getting back into there. That office has existed since then as both a VA certifying official and affirmative action and equal employment. But with the massive growth since the post-9/11 GI Bill, we've seen we need to do something very different. Next slide, please. I was brought on last year to look at this problem, and the process that I used was how do we better deliver military and veteran services. I looked at all the offices here that could potentially and are working with veterans in some form or fashion. I found that was a little over 30 and about 50-some different individuals. I looked at what we would like to have and speaking to all those folks, and there was broad consensus on a need to do more and a need to do it under academic success as the organizing principle. I also looked at what are the external requirements that we're getting, whether that be from the federal government or our state board of regents, and then the VA itself. And then I looked at pretty much every university, major university in our state. I looked at the Big Ten CIC that we belong to, and I looked at many others across the country that are large like us to try and find best practices to bring to our new program. Go ahead and update that, please. So what we're doing is rather than just adding on another person or two to process GI Bill paperwork, which is needed, in fact, I've explained that to the university as what I call the price of entry to serving veterans. If you look at it when they were in the military, when they were deployed out to do a mission, they knew that their families and their pay, two most important things to them, were taken care of. So if we don't get that right up front, whatever else we do as a university doesn't matter, is what I've explained, and they've embraced that here. So we want to get that right, and that does mean more people to process the paperwork and get it timely and get it right. But we want to do a lot more than that. We want to serve the veterans with what they need. So the first one was to look at the whole military family. So I use the term veteran, but what I mean is active duty, Guard, Reserve, retired, and separated from any branch of service and their family members. Many of you are probably seeing this, but with this new GI Bill, we're up over 100 dependents now using post-9/11 benefits here on the campus. We want to focus this entirely around academic success. That has to be the organizing principle. That is the mission, if you will. Everything else we do on the campus is in support of that. And that's not to say that it's not important or it doesn't play a major role, but that's needed. Obviously, get the VA processing correct. Have a positive life and college transition. A lot of our student life programs are focused around that. And that's not unique to veterans, but there are some things that are. But it is certainly like your non-traditional students. As I say, they're non-traditional students, but with more. They're more likely to be older. They're more likely to have dependents. They're more likely to have been through multiple schools, those type of things. And then finally, I wanted to leverage our Veterans Task Force that had been up and running here for about a year and a half. And in my informal looks, probably about 60% of universities across the country have something like this going right now. And that is a great initiative because it cuts across the entire university. However, at the end of the day, it's no one's job to make sure what's being recommended gets done. So in my case, I was brought in to be that advocate and to be that push to get us over the hump. Next slide, please. So the way we're going to reset our military and veteran services is, again, focused under academic success. This office will be recast and realigned under our provost. It currently resides under human resources based on the historical, where it came from. But to get the proper funding, to get the proper focus, and to get acceptance at this university, it needed to be a provost and an academic priority. We started veterans orientations last fall that will happen every term. We still have our admissions regular orientations where they do the academic placement and those type of things. But then we bring over our veterans for a very focused one on what they need and that the resources that are available to them. We want to let them know they're appreciated, that they're not alone, and that there's an enormous amount on this campus that they can use. We will have academic counselors and advisors in this office dedicated to the veterans. And then again, as I talked about, while it may be under the provost, the student life support and our enrollment services are critical to this because they have the things like counseling and consultation services, mental health, all those type of things, student advocacy. And we're doing it through an internal liaison or partnership where many of those will come over into the veterans office and hold regular hours. And the thought is, if the veteran knows that, hey, counseling and consultation services are over here every Friday, I'll just go to the office that I already go to on a routine basis. And then the further thought is they'll start to build trust with all of the folks on this campus, and if they have issues or they need help, they'll be willing to tell us. The next and most important, as you heard about from ACE's recommendation, is to educate faculty and staff. We started that process with a major conference that we held, brought in national speakers. We did it in February. It was a joint effort between our Veterans Office, myself, the Student Life Program, and our University Center for the Advancement of Teaching. And it was targeted to faculty. We had about 130 participants. Kicked off before that for a week, or actually 4 weeks leading up with a reading group, with a small group that we asked to go back out and tell folks about it and get them to sign up for the conference. That was the first stage. The next stage is to continue that education. We do it now. We go into every new faculty orientation and speak to the groups. We go to the new advisors groups. We just started that last week and speak to them. We're going to the career counselors panels and speaking to them. And this will continue as this office ramps up. And then finally, much like the internal liaison, we have an external liaison. We're working with our state and federal VA to bring them in. We have a medical hospital here in town, and a lot of times the individuals need to go over there just for paperwork. So we're going to bring in the VA to this office. We're going to bring in our county veteran services offices to this office. And also, in addition to serving the veterans by bringing those folks in, this office is going to go out to our Board of Regents and other entities to try and work issues on a state level where we can, and potentially even on a federal level. I've engaged with our Government Affairs Office and the individual who sits in D.C. on some long-term things we'd like to see happen. So that's kind of where we're going in our process. We hope to have our full-blown office up and running by the fall. Actually, in the start of the fall, we're moving to semesters this August, and we want to have this up and running on a much bigger basis than we do now. The other thing we did was we started a student website on Ohio State for veterans. We had one before, wasn't very good. It was done by our Student Life group again, and when this office is up and running, it'll be taken over by that office and by the student veteran workers that are going to be in the office through the VA work study, so they can put on what they want, is really what we're looking for. And I think my time's about up, so I'll pass it over to Steve at Rutgers now.
Thank you, Colonel Carrell. Just a reminder before we go to Colonel Abel that if you have questions, to please use the chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and go ahead and type them in, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentations. And also, we will be sending out copies of this PowerPoint and give you access to the webinar later on this week. Colonel Abel, if you would please continue.
Thank you very much. I'm Steve Abel, Rutgers University Director of Veteran and Military Programs and Services. Rutgers University is the State University of New Jersey. We have 3 campuses in New Brunswick, Newark, and Camden. That geographically gives us a presence in the north, central, and south part of the states. The student population here of Rutgers is 58,000 students working on degrees, another 50,000 students working on certificate programs. Of the 58,000 students working for credits, 40,000 of those are located here in New Brunswick, 12,000 in Newark, 6,000 in Camden. The veterans who are working for credit and receiving VA educational benefits is just over 1,000. That's up from 440 just 2 years ago. And as Mike said, women veterans have a large presence on campus. We are just slightly higher than the national average, with 30% of our veterans of our veterans being women. We have another 250 to 300 veterans who are not using VA educational benefits for a broad variety of reasons. Our office was established in July 2010. It was done. The catalyst for having that done was the fact that 2 of our veteran students stood up at a university senate meeting and asked the president questioned the president as to whether or not he thought Rutgers was doing enough to attract veterans to come to Rutgers and make sure that they were successful while they're here. The outcome of that was the establishment of our office. We have 3 full-time employees here at the university, additional part-time employees, and among our 3 campuses, more than 8 certifying officials. Slide, please. One of the outgrowths of that question that was asked was the establishment of a university-wide committee on veteran services. Initially, that committee was intended to be a one-time committee making specific recommendations. They made 14 recommendations. All of those have been implemented in full or in part. But as another outgrowth of the committee, the university president decided to maintain the committee as a permanent committee here at the university. I would add that in addition to having this committee that specifically focuses on veterans and their issues, my office, my assistant, and I sit on about another 12 committees at the university, to include an academic oversight committee, a lifelong learning committee, a disability services board. And so right now at Rutgers, when policy issues are being made for the university, not just specifically for veterans, but for the university, there is a veteran present who can articulate a veteran's point of view for those issues. The missions that we have are based on the 2 students to increase the enrollment, persistence, and completion rates at the university. I agree with Mike and Ohio State. The key for us at Rutgers and our top priority is academic success. And then finally, as you see on that second bullet under number 1, there is a career services issue. That actually was raised by the 3 student groups on each of our campuses independently. They said they would be honored to have a Rutgers diploma to hang on their office walls. They just wanted to make sure that they had an office wall to hang it on. So we do work with a number of different folks in the area, to include corporations, to further career services for our graduates. We serve as the single point of contact for veterans on campus. We tell them at our orientations, and we have orientations on all of our campuses on all of our orientation days, and there's a breakout session specifically for veterans, and we tell them, we are here to assist you with any and every issue that distracts you from the main reason you are here at Rutgers, and that is to earn your degree. We established early on in that first term a committee that is able, and we call it our veteran support team. That team is able, consists of a member of every office on campus who touches a student at the university. And we have senior members in those offices. So we work with deans, associate deans, assistant deans, vice presidents, associate vice presidents, assistant vice presidents, and directors of all the staff functions that support the students here. It allows us to find out an issue from a student and get a timely resolution to those issues. That's been very helpful. In our second term here, we expanded our capability to include those in-house services. So here at Rutgers, the Vice Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences is the Veterans Academic Advisor for the university. One of the psychologists at our mental health clinic here on campus did her Ph.D. internship at the East Orange and Lions VA medical centers on the PTSD wards. She is our dedicated psychologist for veterans. Likewise, we have a disability services advisor specifically designated for veterans. A member of a state employee who files claims and follows up on claims on behalf of our veterans, and a veterans tutoring program specifically geared to veterans. The university's tutoring program is great, but our dedicated tutoring program for veterans links a specific tutor with a specific veteran for the entire term. That program has proven to be exceptionally successful. In fact, everyone who has taken us up on the tutoring program has passed with more than an acceptable grade. We have a dedicated facility on each of our campuses here in New Brunswick. It's an 8-room house that's been completely remodeled for us at the edge of the College Avenue campus. But we have dedicated student lounges on the other 2 campuses as well. Slide, please. In addition to the staff that I already mentioned, we have either a dean or an associate chancellor on each of our campuses who can assist us if we feel that our office is running into a roadblock. I can tell you that those folks are pretty much out of business. The university has been over backwards to make sure that veterans and the success of veterans at Rutgers is a priority. We do, as I mentioned, veteran-specific orientations. As I already mentioned, we have veteran student veteran organizations on all 3 of our campuses. We have a mentorship program that's really a 2-phase program. The first is where we link veterans from our student organizations to the oncoming veterans. It's much like the sponsorship program that service members realize as they transfer from station to station. But the other mentorship program we have links specific staff, faculty, and alumni with our students as well. That proves to be useful both here on campus and in their lives beyond the university. Those staff, faculty, and alumni are in many cases veterans, but not in all cases. Our staff and faculty truly realize the service and sacrifice that our men and women are making, and have volunteered to assist. We have a flexible enrollment deadlines for veterans. So the enrollment deadline that's published for the general public is not one that veterans and military are held to. One of the early policy changes, an example of one of the early policy changes, was the fact that all veterans at Rutgers are now eligible for graduate school housing. It took us just about an hour and a half to put that policy in place at the university when an older veteran was initially assigned to an 18-year-old dormitory. We're pleased with the national ranking that we received from the Military Times Group, although that's only one of several that we've received. We have recently co-authored a book, a chapter in the book that talks about the things that we think are important in setting up a veterans organization. And at that, I believe I'm out of time, or just about out of time. So I'll stop now, and I think we're ready for our next presenter.
Thank you very much, Colonel Abel. And now, Dr. Joseph, if you could continue.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Joseph. I'm a clinical psychologist at Oakland Vet Center. For those of you not familiar with vet centers, we're associated with the VA, but we are separate from the VA. We provide readjustment counseling for combat zone veterans, veterans who have served in a combat zone or have military sexual trauma. Those are really the only populations that we treat here. And so about 50% of my clients are returning OIF and OEF veterans. As part of this position, I became acquainted with and then had a chance to do work in a consulting fashion with the California Community College Chancellor's Office. And we developed together with a grant that they had received, the Welcome Home Project that you see on the screen in front of you, where we developed and provided 6 pilot trainings of about 3 to 4 hours that included an educational moment about military cultural competency, and then another part of focusing on mental health issues such as PTSD, and finished with suggestions and kind of concrete ideas about how faculty and staff can improve their interactions with veterans. And that was the essence of the trainings. We did 6 of them. We have 8 more scheduled, and evaluations have suggested a lot of positive outcomes. The reason behind the training and why I was so happy to be part of it was that in conversations with veterans, we found that their relationships with faculty and staff tended to provide kind of unique opportunities for failure or success in terms of the veteran's academic career. And so in some cases, we heard from veterans that particular instructors or particular faculty members really serve to deter their progress, either by a misunderstanding of mental health needs or a misunderstanding or inability to help when it comes to some of the logistical issues that were talked about earlier. In the same moment, we also heard from veterans how many veterans who go on to have academic success can cite one or two faculty members that really provided them with a tremendous amount of encouragement and support in very particular ways that allowed them to be successful in their studies and move forward. So we felt like faculty and staff in particular, because of their day-to-day contact with veterans, would be really tremendously important in terms of increasing their understanding of what it is that veterans go through. If we could go to the next slide. One of the ways that we've really started talking about veterans in a way that I think we're finding to be really effective, and something I would encourage others to think about, is to talk about returning veterans as their own, in a sense, cultural group, which is to say that we recognize that, like any cultural group, I think of them more like foreign exchange students to a degree. Like any cultural group, they have difficulty adjusting to this new life, to the new place that they're in. And that's not just university life, it's also civilian life, even if they've never deployed, but especially if they have. So obviously if you've served in a combat zone 3, 4, 5, 6 deployments, that readjustment process may be more difficult. We talk about things like immigration anxiety, having to deal with new structures of authority, their own concept of authority, what they're allowed to do and who they're in charge of, and also the new authority figures that are in their life and the ways that they can manage those authorities, the different expectations for their behavior, whether it's the way that aggression is reinforced or not reinforced, the way directness is accepted and not accepted, the way expectations of others, including their expectations of professors and their expectations of themselves, the way those may need to be adjusted in order for them to really be successful and to feel like they fit in. And then lastly, we talk a lot about some unspoken things, and as you would with any with any cultural move or cultural shift, you went from one place to another, there'd be a tremendous amount of unspoken customs that you would have to get used to. What we find is that most people underestimate, and this includes the veterans, most people underestimate the degree of difficulty that's involved in this process. And to the degree that we can prepare veterans, and that's my job, partly my job here at the Vet Center, and prepare faculty and staff for what that transition entails, that's including but also separate from mental health issues, I think we can really positively affect veterans' experiences on campus. If we could just move to the next slide, please. One of the things that we've come in contact with when talking to faculty is a fair amount of confusion about how to work successfully with veterans. There's a lack of clarity about how to meet needs, how to provide guidance. Some faculty are really overcautious in relating to veterans. They hear a lot about things like PTSD and aggression or PTSD and anger. They don't know what they can say or who they can say it to. A tremendous lack of knowledge. We see this in the Bay Area, which is not in some ways a very military place. It doesn't have a huge military presence. We see a lack of knowledge about military culture and, as I talked about, readjustment issues. And then a lack of clarity about what to look for. Well, how can they recognize a veteran? How can they recognize a veteran that's in distress? And what are some concrete things that they can do? Some of the real challenges that we talk about in the training, and this is obviously takes 3-4 hours to go into, but some of the real challenges of PTSD include understanding the concept of safety in PTSD and why their veterans may feel unsafe in what seems to us to be a very safe setting, our classrooms, why they're so anxious, why their concentration is not what they think it should be and what we think it should be, where frustration is coming from, why sleep is affecting them. These are some of the really kind of larger issues that have to do with PTSD that we found that faculty and staff tend not to know very much about, even those that are fairly informed. And when we can give them some concrete steps to recognizing and doing something with those things, we find that they are happier and veterans are happier. If we go to the next slide. Some of the strategies that we've employed to really get buy-in in terms of staff and faculty is, again, to present veterans as a cultural group. We talk about veterans as the other 1%, or the true 1%, because active duty military is about 1% of our population. And so we're talking very much like we would in other venues about increasing cultural competency, which is to say decreasing stereotypes, recognizing challenges, empowering staff relationships, which largely means demystifying PTSD and mental health issues and providing concrete tools, as we talked about. When we're able to do these things, we find that there's a tremendous willingness on the part of staff to really participate in helping the veterans succeed on campuses. When they understand what it is that they're dealing with and how they can go about it, as with all of us, they begin to feel more competent, and they report continued success with veterans. We hear back from our veterans when they have those positive relationships with staff, how much it means to them and how much it allows them to move forward through some of these challenges to really be successful. And that, I think, is the end of my time.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph. We do have a number of questions that have come in, not surprisingly. The first one is, do you have any suggestions for student advocates to get a rather unresponsive school administration to start looking at or start adding these services? Colonel Carrell, would you like to comment on that, please?
I was fortunate to have a very receptive administration, but I would tell you, start to compare your university to whatever your university considers its peers, whether it be in your state or if you're in another organization, academic or any other. Start talking about what other universities are doing. Show the financial impact of veterans to your college. You know, I went through and I showed pretty much every federal dollar that was coming in, including research dollars that are coming in, many times with the Department of Defense or Department of Veterans Affairs and those type of things. So show them the impact, and then go also and start to, it's the right thing to do. I mean, go back and look at what the GI Bill did in, you know, coming out of World War II and the various GI bills. So there's different levels you can appeal to here. But also I would go back to, and we've all mentioned it, it's academic success. And as David just mentioned, it's talking about these folks as another group on your campus, a protected group legally on your campus, by the way, that you can also use. So I think it's a various means that you use. You want to use them all, but you also need to look at what does your leadership value and where do military and veteran students fit into there.
Colonel Abel, do you have anything to add to that?
I think Mike is right on with all the points that he made, actually. The comparison piece is exceptionally effective. I know that although Rutgers, right from the first day, has just wrapped its arms around this office and the veterans on campus, there have been some things that Rutgers has been behind other schools in. And when you are able to make a comparison to the other AAUs or the other schools that are comparable to the school that you're at, that goes a long way in selling the program and having the university buy in.
This is Mike Carrell again. Let me add one more thing to that, and I'll use an example here from Ohio State. Compare yourself to what your university sees as its peers. And in my case, it was large research universities and Big Ten universities. But as I also told them up front, I'm going to compare you to the other schools in Ohio, because whether you like it or not, from a veteran's perspective or someone who is from the state of Ohio, you are a peer. So Ohio University, Miami University, Bowling Green, they're all our peers. And in some cases, they were doing some better things than we are. So we like to say we are the flagship for the state, but when other schools are doing those things better, they need to understand that, and we need to learn from them and get better. So I think it is a very effective tool.
Dr. Joseph, would you like to comment?
Only to say, first of all, of course, I agree with what's been said so far, and to add only that when we've noticed resistance, oftentimes we've noticed that it comes from a lack of understanding of what it is that veterans need and why they need it. And when that can be provided, I've found that it does open some doors. There's really just often a misunderstanding about these the challenges of readjustment, the challenges of being in civilian life in a university system for veterans when they return home. And I think when that is made clear and when it's shown that these kinds of services will really increase academic success, then we've started to see some warming to these services.
Thank you. This question for you, Colonel Abel. You speak of assisting veterans, but do you also mean spouses and other family members as well? If so, how do you identify these students if they're not using military financing?
So yes, we at Rutgers, when we refer to veterans, and in fact I mentioned, our slide says veteran, but I mentioned the name change that we just went through at one of our committee meetings earlier this week. We service veterans, active duty military, Guard, Reserve, family members of all of the above. And Rutgers did not do a very good job of identifying that group prior to the establishment of this office. In fact, prior to January of last year, the only question on the application for Rutgers was, is the VA going to pay for your education? That's a paraphrase. Subsequently, we have had the application changed to add questions about active, Guard, Reserve, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, combat or not. That helps us determine whether or not we need to deal with a PTSD issue with a particular veteran, and as well as exactly what kind of educational benefit you're going to use, whether it's a transfer out of Chapter 33 or 31 or 35 or 1606 or 1607. So we now ask a broad range of questions. We won't know the exact population in all of those categories, though, for a few more years, because, again, it was just instituted in January of last year.
Colonel Carrell.
Yeah, it is harder if they're not using any benefits. So what we've tried to do here is I've gone out to where these students most likely would be. I've worked with our admissions and what we call our first-year experience folks to mention in the regular orientations as well as our transfer student orientations that we do have military services, there is an office available, and there is a military orientation if they're so inclined to do that. But then working with our non-traditional student office, and again, going out to meet all the different groups to educate folks on your faculty and staff, because they're the ones that are going to interact with them. And if you find out they are a dependent or a spouse or whatever it might be, they can mention, oh, did you know that we have an office here? Did you know that we have services? Those type of things. So it is a challenge, but I think by educating those folks that are going to be out there interacting, as well as the faculty, it was one of the things we talked about during our faculty conference. So anybody that might come in contact with them, once they find that out, if the individual shares it, that they are a spouse or a child, you know, that they can find out there are other groups out there for them.
Dr. Joseph, this is a question for you, especially being that you're at a vet center. From that focus, what is the biggest challenge facing vets, and what do you recommend?
Well, that's a tough question. In the sense that as a vet center psychologist, I have a sort of select group of veterans that I see, and it's important to comment on that, because I think oftentimes when we talk about veterans, we think specifically about combat veterans who served one to multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Of course, that is an important subgroup, but it's not the only group of veterans that are on our campuses. So first of all, the veterans that I see, the vast majority of them have PTSD or traumatic brain injury or some combination of that. And of course, for them, that's a huge problem. I would say in a more general sense, the main difficulty that veterans I talk to have, this kind of common denominator has to do with this idea of kind of a cultural adaptation to being back into civilian life. And that also means back with their families in a different way and finding their way without the structure and, in a sense, the family that was the military. And so I think most veterans, even veterans that served here in the States, will really talk about the difficulty of that transition. And then particularly on a university campus, seeing themselves really as quite different from many of the other students, whether it's age, previous experience, attitude, worldview, whatever it is. So I would say overall that's probably an experience that almost every veteran can relate to.
Yeah, this is Mike Carrell. I'd like to add to that, and this goes back to the point about maybe helping get your administration or folks on the campus to accept this and have more of a push on it. As David mentioned, a lot of these folks are transitioning back from combat, which is very hard. They're also transitioning from the military to civilian life, which is very hard. And they're transitioning to being college students, which is very hard. The university is well aware of that last one. They understand that transition, and if you look at the resources and the programs they have, it's enormous. You need to make them understand that all of the military students are undergoing that, but they're also undergoing two more, potentially, if they were in combat, that are actually much harder, and they're doing all three at the same time. Then they might just start to understand that this is an at-risk population, no matter how you want to define it, and we need to help them.
Colonel Abel, would you like to comment?
I would. I agree with that, especially the point that Dr. Joseph made last when he was talking about the comfort of the veteran on campus. And we have seen a dramatic change in the attitude of veterans over the last 2 years here at Rutgers. Prior to the establishment of our office, where veterans often did not self-identify on campus, who did feel themselves as outsiders, because they do come to the university, although most full-time students, they come to the university a bit older than the other students on campus. Since the establishment of the office, and since we have established a number of other programs to honor veterans, so we have major events. We had 7 separate events associated with Veterans Day this year on all 3 of our campuses, to include a ceremony, but the ceremony wasn't enough. We also did panel discussions, and we did civilian veteran dialogues. And so that opened up the university to recognizing the service and sacrifice of veterans and the issues that they face as they are coming on campus. We do a Veterans Appreciation Dinner every April, where we invite all of our veterans to have a dinner with us here on the New Brunswick campus, as well as key members of the staff and faculty, along with veteran alumni, staff, and faculty. So all of those things together have shown the veterans at Rutgers that it's good to be a veteran and to tell your story. And we emphasize that during our orientations when we tell them, you know, you need to get everything out of this university that you can, but you must experiences, your rather unique experiences with the larger Rutgers community, with the faculty and the staff and your fellow veterans, because less than 1% of the men of the eligible population in this country actually serves in uniform. And all of that has had a really great effect. And we do have veterans stepping out. And so as we did these kinds of programs at Rutgers, we actually had the president of our student government come to us and say, I have established in the student government a committee to deal with veterans issues. And then a few months later he came back to us and said, I have now established a seat on the student government for a veteran. And so, I mean, this education piece, certainly we need to bring along the faculty, but truly this education piece is a university-wide education piece that touches staff, faculty, and the other students of the university. And all of that will ease the transition for veterans from combat to campus. Thank you.
Colonel Carrell, you talked about veterans transitioning onto campus into academia. What benchmarks should be met for student veterans arriving on campus for their new student orientation? How do you see these really differ from orientations done for non-veteran population students?
Well, what we try and do is not repeat the same things that they might be getting in a transfer orientation or new student orientation. What we have is our Veterans Affairs Office comes in to make sure that everyone there has been through the VA process and registered. They've got their benefits paperwork done, those type of things, because, you know, we have actually seen people, they have been in Afghanistan or Iraq, and then literally within less than 10 days have been standing at our door saying, hey, I'm here, I'm registered, I'm going to class. So we want to make sure that's one thing that we catch. We have our student advocacy and our Office of Disability Services get up and talk about what services they have to offer. And here we emphasize that word disability. We talk about that. We talk that they have rights as students to have mental health counseling, to get more time on a test, whatever it might be, and that does not have any effect whatsoever on their disability rating that they get from the VA. So we make sure they understand that they have different rights in different arenas. We also make sure that they understand there's not a negative connotation with disability like they may have in the military. So if I've got someone in the Guard and Reserves, that usually means they can't do their job. We want them to understand that as a student, you have that right to go in, if you have a disability, to get whatever you need to help you academically. So we have those folks talk. We bring in the local VA medical, and they make sure that they're all registered there. If they're not, they can register them on the spot. We also have our president and or our provost usually comes in to give them a welcome, to again let them know that they're valued, they're not alone here. And then finally I talk to them about the similar type thing, but also what Steve mentioned, that they have unique experiences in leadership that they need to give back to the university. And then we end it with a social type thing with food, and we have families there and all that, but it's really focused on the things that they won't get elsewhere. We have a financial aid person comes in, talks directly to other financial aid that is available to them separate from the GI Bill and what that means and how that works. So it's very focused on veteran or military issues only. We do speak to if they're mobilized during it or if they're coming back from a deployment, how that works, what our university policy is that we have, and we do have one now, and it's set. So we go through those types of issues. So it's not a repeat, but it is very focused on what they need and what they might be able to use while they're here.
Colonel Abel, anything to add to this?
We do very similar to what Mike outlined. I mean, our breakout sessions immediately follow the orientations of the general population. And so we focus on the specific and broad range of services that we have access to for veterans. So all of those subjects that Mike just enumerated are covered in ours as well. Our campus is 7 miles by 5 miles, so we actually put a map of the university up to kind of show them exactly where we are. But essentially, Mike outlined in fairly good detail the kinds of things that we do as well.
Dr. Joseph, from your perspective, anything that you can recommend in terms of orientation in the transition process?
I think largely it's been covered. Oftentimes it's for veterans that we talk to, there's a lot of sort of logistical confusion. They can't just go to their first sergeant the way that they're used to, and they don't know always where the place is they need to go, what hours is available, what's the plan. And to the degree that they can be pointed in very specific directions and given warm handshakes or handoffs to the people that actually are going to be helpful to them, I think we see veterans really appreciate that.
Great. These next two questions I'm going to try to combine, and I'll preface the question with the idea that people are interested in examining what small schools can do, schools that don't have the resources, for example, of Rutgers or Ohio State, or those schools that have small multi-campuses. With that in mind, in these small schools, if you have a military spouse, one of the biggest challenges this person is asking the question says is that this challenge was in staying in one location long enough to get a graduate degree. Do you advise veterans about the best method to achieve academic success even when they may leave your university prior to finishing the degree? I hope that question made sense because I'm trying to kind of put things together because we have so many questions here. Would either of the panelists here, any one of you care to address it?
This is Steve Abel over at Rutgers. So I think it's an important one for whatever size school you are to have the leadership at your school behind you. I think it's important that there be an employee of the school whose primary responsibility and duty title is taking care of veterans and military on the campus. Now, in a small school, they may have additional responsibilities, but it can't be in title only. And I don't think it necessarily can be the certifying official unless the certifying official takes time to understand all of the rules and benefits and entitlements that veterans have, because the person who does this needs to offer specific advice, and the person needs to be able to link to other services on campus to resolve issues in a fairly timely manner. The whole stereotype of the military, hurry up to wait, is not what should be happening on the college campus. I also think that regardless of the size of the campus, and I think we've all spoken to it already, having a university-wide committee where students can address, or faculty members or staff can address specific issues or concerns they have about veterans is likewise important. And then I've already mentioned earlier that, you know, the university can conduct small events. I mean, a Veterans Day seminar or panel discussion, or a dialogue, or I think, as Mike has already mentioned, and as we do here at Rutgers, I mean, there can be an appreciation dinner or breakfast or something that brings the veterans community together so that it gels. I mean, all of those things are not, can be done by smaller schools as well as schools the size of Rutgers or Ohio State.
Just to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
This is David. I wanted to just jump in too and say, you know, one thing that I think small schools can do that some of the small schools in our areas do is to delegate some of these services to local VAs, nonprofits, and vet centers. So one of the things that you can do is not recreate the wheel and invite vet center personnel, invite VA personnel, invite some of the local nonprofits who work with veterans to have a presence on your campus. Oftentimes, just facilitating that relationship and everybody getting to know each other and having personal relationships allows the vet center, whose mission it is to do outreach, incidentally, to have a presence on campus and takes some of that responsibility away from the college to have to train people to do that. So if you do have those services in your area, being able to leverage that, I think, is helpful.
Yeah, this is Mike. I would look at the combining, if you're with other universities in a like maybe 3 or 4 small universities or community colleges, and if you have regional campuses, potentially what we did was we do all the certifying official here at the main campus. We have 5 regional campuses, and that allows those individuals that are at those regional campuses to focus more on the issues that are affecting the students and try and help them. The other thing I would tell you is try like heck to get a student veterans organization on that campus through the SVA and get a nationally recognized charter and chapter. Those folks will be able to do a lot of stuff for you. It also goes back to how do you get the university to take notice. When there's an organized student group and they're vocal, they'll get noticed. And then to touch on that last part, it was a little odd with the grad school with someone moving around. I would just say the best advice you can give them, and I did it when I was in the military, is you need to be very good about what type of a graduate degree you're picking. If you know that you're going to move during it, get one that's offered at multiple places, that you're not picking such a unique one that there's only one school to do it, or work out a program with the university that up front say, hey, I'm going to be gone for the last 3 or 4 classes of this. Can we do this? But be right up front and be honest with them.
We have an awful lot of more questions here, but we've run out of time. And to conclude this webinar, I was wondering or hoping that the panelists will make a statement of about a minute long, just summing up their experience, and if they have any last words they would like to mention. Colonel Carrell, if you could go first, please.
Yeah, I would just say the message that we try and get out here for our students is you're appreciated, you're not alone, there's a lot of resources to help, and that you have a lot that you can give us as faculty and staff with your experience. For our faculty And our staff, the key that I've told you is the education piece. Continue to fight that battle and get out in front of all the different groups that you can to make more information known about this. And the best view I can see is, and I think, you know, us and Rutgers are a little different, we're aligned under a provost and focused on academic success. Most of the universities that I looked at were not, and it's not to say that they can't succeed under a registrar or a financial aid office or student life, but it's harder because it's not the core mission of that university. So the closer you can move into that and get that understood, I think that is good. We're starting to see some universities that went out in front. I saw this at the National Convention in February, that were aligned somewhere else. They're struggling 4 or 5 years later, both financially and acceptance from the faculty or things like that. So I think you need to keep that core mission in sight and get the leadership on board in that realm. Thank you. And I think you'll give them at the end our phone numbers and email, and feel free to contact me about anything.
Colonel Abel.
Yes, so I think one of the things that schools need to do is make sure that they know who their veterans, military, and family members are. That has been a challenge here at Rutgers because we weren't collecting that data. And then effectively communicating with that group via social media or emails or ads in the student newspaper or whatever. I agree with Mike that the primary responsibility that we have at the university is academic success, but clearly Rutgers and Ohio State disagree with how we do that. At Rutgers, our office is under the Vice President for Student Affairs. He's I directly report to him. Folks who have difficulty at the university generally don't have difficulty on the academic side of the house. It's all the other issues that are biting them in the butt that cause them to divert their attention from their academics. And all of those staff issues fall under, for the most part, the Vice President for Student Affairs. The mental health counseling, the disability services, those kinds of things. And so for us to effectively influence the action on campus, we can do it with our peers in student affairs. That's not to say that we don't have a close working relationship with all of the deans of the academic schools or with the Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs. We in fact do. But where we can influence the battle are on all those support agencies. Our academicians here at the university understand what we do and are supportive of it. And again, feel free to contact me at any time, and I thank you all for joining us on this webinar.
Dr. Joseph.
Yeah, kind of in summation, two sort of main points. The first is to kind of reiterate the idea that, especially for smaller schools and for campuses around the country, to really leverage the nonprofits, vet centers, VAs in your area, invite them onto your campus, invite them to have a positive effect on your students. And when you can do that, and when the VAs are capable of doing that, particularly the vet centers, I think it really adds to your campus and gives veterans a sense of being welcomed there as well. The other main point that I'd like to kind of reiterate is the tremendous importance of training and education when it comes to faculty and staff about veterans issues, whether it's readjustment, sort of standard readjustment issues, readjustment to university and civilian life, or mental health issues like PTSD and TBI. Really don't underestimate the degree to which faculty understanding of those issues makes a tremendous difference to the veterans that they come in contact with. So it's not particularly expensive or complicated to do a 3 or 4 hour training, I wouldn't think, and I think you get a lot of bang for your buck.
I want to thank the panelists very much. Excellent presentations, wonderful, wonderful knowledge, insight into best practices. I want to thank the participants. Those questions that we weren't able to get to, we will email them to the panelists for a response. Thank you again. I appreciate your attendance, and have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Glenn.